this all ends in death, so your freedom to choose and try to obtain your goal amounts to nothing. This is the way of Sakama Karma, which is desiring the fruits of your actions. There is another path, and that is Nishkama Karma, and by following that path, this world of becoming, this endless fire is an altar. It is an altar where we place ourselves to sacrifice to ourselves. All of our hopes and fears and our joys and sorrows are burned away in this offering to our eternal self. The world ceases to be a place of despair based upon craving things, but a magical right where our existence is affirmed. No longer is our life based upon satisfying our desires, but is affirmed as it is, as a divine sacrifice. We do not desire anything, since our life is offered to what is more than life. We should not see our lives as faulty, based upon future projects of wealth not achieved, but as a right that my eternal self has offered to my eternal self by sacrifice in the flame of becoming through pure devotion, and thus I desire nothing because of the purity and completeness of my sacrifice. I no longer exist in Tana and Avidya, but in Bhakti and Jnana. This reminds me of the sacrifice of Odin, where he hangs himself on the world tree for 9 days and 9 nights to gain knowledge of the runes. I know that I hung upon a windy tree for 9 whole nights, wounded with a spear and given to Odin. Myself for me, on that tree I knew nothing of what kind of roots it came from. Okay, within philosophy of mind, it could be argued that there are 2 positions, that of the monist and that of the dualist. The monist believes that there is just one substance, a material substance, the brain, and the mind is just a resultant or function of the brain, whereas the dualist believes that there are 2 substances, a mental substance and a material substance, and their relation could be like something I have on the screen. You have a white light, the mind, which passes through a prism, the brain, and then there's 7 colors. So there's kind of a relationship between the 2, but there is a separate mental substance that explains for the experience as well. Now, they both have their arguments. The monist would believe that all we really need to do is basically apply Occam's razor to the situation. We can explain everything just by understanding how the brain operates. We don't need to posit an additional entity, a mental substance, to explain it. Everything can just be explained by understanding how the brain operates, all the neurochemicals in it, neurotransmitters, just etc. We can just go from that and explain everything. The dualist disagrees. And ultimately, what they would say is that that reductionism is a form of greedy reductionism. We have a subjective aspect to our experience that ultimately is not reducible to that scientific understanding. That first-person perspective is ultimately not reducible to that third-person perspective. And there's arguments like the quality argument, which, if I remember correctly, is that something like this. Let's say you have a deaf scientist who all of his life he's unable to hear, but he studies hearing. He studies it from a scientific perspective, knows everything what's happening in the brain. And then one day, suddenly goes under a procedure and gains his hearing, gains the ability to hear. Well, the subjective experience he has is nothing like his scientific understanding. Now, what I want to do is use this as a heuristic to understand evolus theory on race, revolt against the modern world. What I will be doing is reading page 56 and 57 of it, a full paragraph and part of another, and hopefully this will spark a discussion. The idea that is sometimes upheld against the insufficiency of these explanations is that of race. The unity and purity of blood are believed by some to be the foundation of life and the strength of a civilization. Therefore, the mixing and the ensuing poisoning of the blood are considered the initial cause of a civilization's decline. This too is an illusion, which among other things lowers the notion of civilization to a naturalistic and biological plane. Since this is the plane on which race is thought of in our day and age, race, blood, hereditary purity of blood, these are merely material factors. A civilization in the true traditional sense of the word arises only when a supernatural and non-human force of a higher order, a force that corresponds to the pontifical function, to the component of the right, and to the principle of spirituality as the basis of a hierarchical differentiation of people, acts upon these factors. At the origin of every true civilization, there lies a divine element. Every great civilization has its own myth concerning divine founders. Thus, no human or naturalistic factor can fully account for it. The adulteration and decline of civilizations is caused by an event of the same order, though it acts in the opposite degenerative sense. When a race has lost contact with the only thing that has and can provide stability, namely with the world of being, and when in a race that which forms its most subtle, yet most essential element has been lost, namely the inner race and the race of the spirit, compared to which the race of the body and of the soul are only external manifestations and means of an expression, then the collective organisms that a race has generated, no matter how great and powerful, are destined to descend into the world of contingency. They are at the mercy of what is irrational, becoming, and historical, and of what is shaped from below and from the outside. Now, upon reading this, one would get the impression that Evola seems to think that blood is unimportant, and what is important is this race of spirit, this transcendent principle which is going through the individual. And you could read that and get that impression from that, but that's only partially true. And to really kind of explain it further, let's read part of the next paragraph. Blood and ethnic purity are factors that are valued in traditional civilizations too. Their value, however, never justifies the employment in the case of human beings of the same criteria employed to ascertain the presence of pure blood in a dog or in a horse, as in the case of some modern racist ideologies. The blood or racial factor plays a certain role not because it exists in the psyche, in the brain, and in the opinions of an individual, but in the deepest forces of life that various traditions experience and act upon as typical formative energies. The blood registers the effects of this action, yet it provides through heredity a material that is preformed and refined so that through several generations, realizations similar to the original ones may be prepared and developed in a natural and spontaneous way. That's the key. Let's go over those couple sentences again. The blood, or racial factor, plays a certain role, not because it exists in the psyche, in the brain, and the opinions of the individual, but in the deepest forces that various traditions experience and act upon as typical formative energies. So that's the thing. The blood registers the effects of this action. So the blood registers the effects of the action. This tradition, which a certain group of people have experienced, the blood has registered this action. It's sort of imprinted on it. And yet it provides heredity and material that is preformed and refined so that through several generations, realizations similar to the original ones may be prepared and developed in a natural and spontaneous way. So what he's saying is, given a certain group of people who have a certain lineage, their blood, their biology has sort of have these imprints of these kind of traditional forces because of the past. So a person who, let's take for example, who is Indo-European, well, his blood has these imprints from his past. He could experience these Indo-European concepts or these Indo-European deities better than somebody would who is, just say, in Africa or East Asia. And the same thing, Taoism or the principles within it, it's registered within the Chinese people, within the East Asian. Vola did make a comment that essentially Taoism is a East Asian Weltanschauung. So it would be what's within their blood. So these deeper experiences, that is already imprinted within them. They get that in that natural and spontaneous way. For us, it would have to kind of be forced. It wouldn't work as well. So that's kind of, his position there. It's sort of like that prism where the light is passing through. So this tradition that would be expressed in an Indo-European manner, when it passes through an Indo-European, for the most part, it goes in those beautiful seven colors. it wouldn't work that way in other groups of people. So, he is giving importance to it, but the importance is more in kind of that dualist manner. He isn't saying that it's the cause of it, the blood is the cause of it, but no, it is the material which has received imprints through several generations that this then can express itself well in. And I do believe that that could be a reason as for why kind of the modern pagan rebirth of some sort. I would probably say, take people from kind of my outlook, a Slavic one, somebody who has more of a natural gravitation towards Slavic paganism than Eastern Orthodoxy or Roman Catholicism, it's because for some reason those imprints in the blood express themselves more. He is in touch more with these divine principles that have expressed themselves in this Indo-European manner. The other person doesn't experience it as well. The tradition doesn't go through him as well, and that's why there would be the attachment to Christianity, or be it either the Eastern Orthodox or the Roman Catholic Church. The same could be said for somebody who's from the north, from Scandinavia. Those who are Azachuar, the imprints in there, they're experiencing this easier. It's going through them better than for somebody who'd have an attachment to Lutheranism.
Don't many Indian tribes want to keep their spiritual ways separate from Western or European religions?
Just from what I've seen, Stefan, I think that that's a very common desire, and you'll find all different gradations of it. I mean, there's portions of Native American spirituality that are accessible to anybody. Anybody can read these and these books. Anybody can go to a powwow. But as you know, at a certain point in the powwow, it's okay. This is for Indians. All you guys, thanks for coming. Glad you appreciated our culture, and see you later. I actually respect that. I respect that a lot. Some of the more radical factions have issued declarations like the Lakota Declaration of Sioux, resistance against exploitation of native beliefs, something to that effect. So there's all sorts of gradations of this, but yes, they want to keep their ways of their people because it's their ancestral heritage.
It was Saturday night and we were at the powwow, and he walked up to me and said, "Are you having a good time?" And I said, "Yeah, we're having a great time." And he said, "Well, good, but I'm going to have to ask you to leave now." And I thought, why? Did we do something to offend you? And he said, no, we're just going to have a ritual, and it's for Indians. And I've got buckskin on, I've got turquoise, my hair's in braids, I've got a feather in my hair, and I'm thinking, but I'm an Indian. And he put his arm around me as we're walking back to the car, and he said to me, he goes, "I know what you're doing." And I was clueless, and I said, "You do?" And he said, "Yeah." And he goes, "You're not going to find what you're looking for here." He said, "You need to drink from your own well." And I didn't have a clue to what he was talking about. Well, fast forward another 30 years, and I've discovered the runes in Edward Thorson's book, A Book of Troth. And as I was reading that book, I was reading about Asatru and Germanic Norse religion. It hit me like a thunderbolt. This is my well. This is the well that he was talking about.
Right. This idea that there are different religions for different groups is one that's put forward by a number